Breaker19. Welcome to the channel. I hope you got your ears on, good buddy. Have you ever seen anything scary while on a road trip? Let me know in the comments below. And in the meantime, listen to the voice from the other side. If you enjoy these stories, hit like and subscribe. This happened in April, so just a few months ago, and I still can't drive through Pennsylvania without thinking about it, especially that stretch near Harrisburg. I've seen a lot on the road, but this was different. This was personal. I had a load coming out of Memphis headed to Allentown, Pennsylvania. Dry goods, lighter trailer. Dispatch gave me another pickup out of Harrisburg that same afternoon, so I had to cut across I-78 and head south onto I-81. Not my favorite corridor. Too crowded, too chaotic. Everyone's in a rush and no one's looking where they're going. It was around 2:30 in the afternoon. Traffic thick enough that you had to stay alert or risk getting boxed in. I was cruising the center lane, keeping a safe distance from the car in front of me. Not tailgating, but not poking along, just pacing traffic. Then this black Dodge Ram comes flying up the left lane. I see him at the last second, cutting across two lanes without signaling and squeezing right in front of me. He left me with no space. I laid on the air horn, not aggressive, just letting him know he almost clipped my nose. He responded by flipping me off through the rear window, full arm extension. Then he slammed his brakes. I had to veer into the right lane to avoid hitting him. My trailer rocked hard enough to jolt the cab. The guy behind me had to swerve into the shoulder. I stayed in the right lane, let off the throttle a little. I figured that was the end of it. Just another hothead having a bad day. But it wasn't over. The Dodge slowed down until we were side by side again. I glanced over and he was staring right at me. Not yelling, not even mouthing anything. Just looking, one hand on the wheel, the other resting like he had all the time in the world. I moved back into the center lane, trying to put space between us. He followed. Every time I changed lanes, he mirrored me. When I sped up, he'd hover in my blind spot. When I slowed down, he'd drop back, only to reappear again in a few minutes. It was deliberate, measured, like he wanted me to know I wasn't getting away from him. I got on the CB and said, "Black Dodge Ram eastbound 78, past exit 49. Watch your ass. Guy's playing games." Someone else chimed in. "He cut me off near Hamburg. Creepy son of a bitch." That helped a little, knowing it wasn't just me. 10 miles went by like that. Me trying to shake him refusing to be shaken. I'd lose sight of him for a minute, then see him 3 cars behind. Then he'd pop up again in my mirror, trailing me like a dog with nowhere else to be. Finally, I figured I'd wait him out. I pulled off at a small service plaza near mile marker 59. Just one of those shoulder setups with fuel, a few vending machines, and barely enough room for a couple of trucks. No security and no lights beyond what came off the pump canopy. I parked along the edge of the lot, shut down the engine, and just sat for a minute. Tried to catch my breath. 10 minutes passed by with no sign of him. Then 15 minutes went by. I got out, walked around, checked the trailer and tires, normal stuff. Picked up a coffee inside. When I walked back to the cab, the sky had darkened. Low clouds rolling in and temperatures dropping. I opened the driver's side door, and there it was. A piece of paper, tucked under the wiper. I stared at it for a second before pulling it free. Folded, dry, and left recently. I opened it. It said, "You think you're safe in that thing? Watch your mirrors. You're not hard to find." No name, no signature. No threats, well, not technically. Just a warning, a reminder. I looked around the lot. No black Dodge, nothing that looked familiar. I walked the perimeter and even circled the pumps, but he was gone. I sat back down in the driver's seat, closed the door and locked it. Then it hit me. The note looked familiar. I'd seen something almost exactly like it online. A photo another driver posted back in December. She'd found a note taped to her window at a pilot in Ohio. Same kind of handwriting, same wording, different message, but the same feel. Same eerie calm. It said, "Not safe, should have kept driving. People remember you." She'd taken a picture of it, shared it in a trucker Facebook group I follow. Said she'd seen a dark pickup leave the lot right after. I scrolled back through my screenshots and found the post. Side by side with the note in my hand, it was too similar to be coincidence. That's when the reality sunk in. This guy wasn't just mad about being honked at. He was looking for a target, a stranger he could fixate on, mess with, follow. He probably wasn't even local, just drifting up and down the interstates, waiting for someone to react. And I reacted. I thought about reporting it, but what would I even say? I didn't have a plate, didn't have proof he followed me. Just a guy in a pickup and a piece of paper that legally meant nothing. I crumpled the note and stuck it in my glove box. Got back on the road and finished the run. But I watched every mirror for the next 100 miles. Every black truck that passed me made me flinch. Every stop I parked, I backed in and kept a flashlight on my lap. He never showed up again. But the worst part is, I don't think he was trying to do anything. I think he just wanted me to know. Know he saw me. Know he chose me. Know I couldn't do a damn thing about it. Sometimes that's all it takes to scare you more than anything else. I've driven long haul most of my adult life. I've dealt with drunks, ice storms, jackknife rigs, you name it. But nothing rattled me quite like that run through Route 36 during a snowstorm back in January a few years ago. I was hauling a load of auto parts out of Salt Lake, headed for a warehouse in Kansas City. It was a straightforward route, until I got word on the CB that I-70 was shut down east of Denver due to a multi-car pileup and drifting snow. Dispatch rerouted me along Highway 36, a 2-lane back route that cuts through rural Colorado and into Kansas. Now, anyone who's driven 36 in the winter will tell you it's a last resort kind of road. No real shoulder, almost no towns, and just long, rolling farmland broken up by the occasional windbreak or barbed wire fence. I hit that stretch around 6 p.m., just as the sun dipped and the wind picked up. Snow was coming down in fat, wet flakes. Not enough to panic, but enough to make you work for every mile. I kept it steady at 40, chains on, lights full beam. About an hour in, I spotted a car off to the side of the road, a beat-up Buick, hazards blinking. No movement. I slowed up to check. Looked like it had slid into a shallow ditch. Hood was open, driver's door ajar, but no one was inside. Normally, I'd stop to check for a stranded motorist, but it was zero visibility and no good place to pull a rig that size over. Plus, there were fresh footprints in the snow leading up toward a fence line. My guess? Whoever it was had already gone looking for help, maybe to one of the farms that dot that stretch. I radioed it in to Highway Patrol just in case. 10 or maybe 15 miles later, I came to a sharp turn. No warning signs. I was easing through it when I noticed a fresh impact mark on the guardrail. Looked recent, like someone hit it and kept going or got pulled out. I'd later find out a local teenager slid off that very bend the night before. Nothing fatal, thank God, but it was clear the road hadn't been plowed in over 24 hours. I radioed that in too. Then came the worst part of the night. I was crawling through what looked like a wind-blasted flat stretch. No trees, no fences, just blank whiteness in every direction. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. I was gripping the wheel tight when I saw movement ahead. Headlights pointed sideways, half buried in the snow. Another vehicle, a pickup this time, sitting in the middle of the road, abandoned. Doors open, no hazards on. This time I did stop. Left my rig idling and got out, stepping into shin-deep snow. It was the kind of cold that burned through your jacket. I called out. Nothing. Checked the cab. It was empty. No blood or broken glass. just a thermos rolling around the floor and an old hunting license stuck to the dash. What shook me wasn't the truck. It was the trail of prints that led from it and then vanished about 30 feet off into the field. No return tracks, just one set heading out, then gone. Either the guy got picked up or the wind had buried his trail. Back in the cab, I debated turning back, but there was no safe place to stop and no good detours. So I pressed on. About 15 miles from Phillipsburg, I saw lights behind me. A set of headlights creeping along in the snow, way back. Too far to make out the vehicle, but close enough to catch my eye. I figured it was another trucker playing it safe. That's when I hit the ice. A gust of wind pushed across an open stretch and the trailer fishtailed. Not hard, but just enough to jerk me awake. I eased off the gas and straightened out, and when I checked the mirror again, the headlights were gone. Vanished. Not because of ghosts or anything like that. I realized later there was a narrow side road there, mostly snowed over. Whoever it was must have peeled off. Could have been a farm truck or a snowplow on a local route. Still, it was unnerving. By the time I made it into Phillipsburg, it was past 2 a.m. I found a gas station still open, bought the worst coffee of my life, and just sat in the cab with the engine running, staring at the snow coming down under the lights. In the morning, I heard from another driver that 2 more cars had gone off the road that night along 36. No fatalities, thank God. But the plows didn't reach that stretch until sunrise. People had gotten stranded out there. No cell reception, no traffic, just snow and cold and dark. I think about that a lot, how close I came to sliding off, how easy it is to assume help is just a phone call away. But out there, it isn't. Nothing paranormal happened that night. No ghosts, no monsters in the dark. Just cold, bad luck, and the kind of isolation that can turn a simple breakdown into a real problem. You don't need anything supernatural to feel scared out there. The dark and the snow are more than enough. I don't usually stop at the Sumter exit off of I-20 in South Carolina. The lot's old, worn down. Most of the lights are out, and the fuel islands always smell off, like mildew mixed with something sharp, kind of like metal. But I was near the end of my clock, and the next rest area was too far out to risk it. It was just after 2 a.m. when I pulled in. I backed my rig along the far edge of the lot between 2 reefers. One of the overhead lights was pulsing, like it couldn't make up its mind whether to stay on or not. I wasn't looking for comfort, just a few hours of sleep before finishing up my run to Atlanta. I'd just killed the engine, cracked the window, and stretched out in the sleeper when I heard it. Knock, knock. 2 light taps on the driver's side door. Not loud, not forceful, just enough to snap me upright. I leaned forward and glanced out the mirror. There was a woman standing there, late 30s maybe, long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, hoodie, jeans, kind of thin. She was chewing something, gum, maybe, but slowly, like her jaw didn't want to move. "Hey, sweetheart, you need some company?" she said. Her tone wasn't pushy. She spoke soft, almost too soft, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "No thanks," I said, "just trying to get some rest." She nodded but didn't leave, just kept standing there, one arm crossed over her stomach, the other dangling by her side. Her fingers twitched a little, like they were tapping out a rhythm against her thigh. "You sure?" she asked again. "I'm not going to take long." "Yeah, I'm good," I said more firmly this time. Still, she didn't move. She looked up at me through the glass, and for a moment, I thought she was waiting for something else, like I was supposed to ask her a question. Her smile twitched at the corners, but never quite settled. Then, finally, she turned and walked back towards the darker part of the lot, slipping between a couple of parked rigs. I exhaled and sat back. She hadn't been threatening, but there was something about the way she stood there, too still. Like she wasn't working, Exactly. Like she was looking for something specific. I laid back down, but I didn't close the curtain. I just had that feeling, that kind of half-alert hum in your chest, where you know you're not going to sleep easy. About 20 minutes later, I was still wide awake when I heard it again. Knock, knock. This time it came from the passenger side. My heart jumped. I sat up slowly, already knowing what I'd see. Sure enough, same woman. But this time she was closer, practically leaning her forehead against the window like she was listening for movement inside. I didn't open it, just sat there frozen. She didn't say anything, just looked at the window, eyes half-lidded. Her other hand was holding something I couldn't quite make out. It looked like a key ring, except there were no keys on it, just a lanyard with some kind of plastic tag. She noticed me staring and held it up. Smiling again, she said, "You dropped this earlier." I hadn't gotten out of the truck since I parked. I hadn't dropped anything. I shook my head. She tilted her head, like she was confused by my answer. Then she slowly backed away and disappeared again into the shadows between trucks. This time I pulled the curtain shut. I don't spook easy, but I've been out here long enough to know when something's off. She didn't act like someone trying to make money. She didn't act high either. If anything, she was too calm, too practiced, like she'd done this dozens of times and already knew how each conversation was supposed to go. But mine didn't go the way she thought. About 40 minutes later, just before 4 a.m., I decided to leave early. I started the engine, let it idle while I did my walk around. The lot was quieter now. The pulsing light above was dead. As I circled the rig, I noticed something that made me stop. On my passenger side fuel tank, near the step, someone had drawn a circle in the dust, a perfect one, not smeared, just traced. I wiped it off with my glove and kept moving, faster this time. A few spots down, I noticed a sleeper with its curtain wide open. Lights inside were still on, but no movement. I'd seen it earlier, older Peterbilt, same spot, but now the driver door was cracked open and the steps were wet. It hadn't even rained. I didn't investigate, just got in my cab and pulled out. Later that morning at a truck stop north of Augusta, I grabbed a coffee and overheard a guy saying his buddy's rig got broken into back at Sumter. Said nothing was stolen, but the guy found an old photo stuck to his windshield. Some woman he didn't know. No note, just the photo. They were laughing about it, saying the guy probably had a wild night he didn't remember. I didn't laugh, and I didn't sleep great for the next few nights either. Nothing had happened, technically. No crime, no threat. Just a weird encounter with a woman who knocked twice and knew just when to come back. Like she had a rhythm, a routine, and maybe she did. I've been through Sumter once since then. I didn't stop, didn't even look at that exit sign. But I still think about that knock sometimes. That knock, knock. Soft, familiar, like someone who knows you're alone and tired, and just wants in. You ever drive down a stretch of highway so long and empty, it feels like the world ends over the next hill? I've been driving rig since '03, and I've seen some weird stuff. Tornadoes that touch down 200 yards away, a guy on bath salts running down the shoulder with a garden hoe, even a lady trying to sell crystal out of a church parking lot. But there's one night that sticks with me, and not for what I saw, more for what I couldn't explain. This happened about 6 years ago. I was hauling a dry van of lighting equipment from Phoenix up to Salt Lake. Late delivery, so I took the night shift. Nothing unusual about that. What was unusual was the route. Dispatch had me take a detour along this older highway that ran parallel to the main interstate. Something about road work up ahead or a big accident. I don't quite remember. All I know is I was running solo on a 2-lane blacktop that didn't see much traffic anymore. Somewhere around northern Arizona, just past midnight, the CB went dead. That wasn't surprising. You get into those mountain stretches and reception disappears. But what got me uneasy was how quiet it all felt. No chatter on the CB, no cars in either direction. Just me, the truck, and the kind of silence that starts making you notice your own breathing. Around mile marker 348, don't ask me why I remember the number so clearly, but I do. I saw a figure standing just outside the beam of my headlights. It wasn't in the road, just off to the side. I slowed down some, thinking it might be somebody needing help. Looked like a man in work clothes, jeans, heavy jacket, maybe a beanie. But here's the thing, he wasn't flagging me down. He was just standing there, motionless, arms at his sides. As I passed, I got a better look. He was facing the road but not looking at me. His eyes were tilted up like he was watching the sky. Gave me the chills, not gonna lie, but I kept driving. About 5 minutes later, I started feeling weird, not in a ghost story kind of way. My hands felt tingly like they'd gone numb. Then I got this headache, sharp, sudden, right behind my eyes. I cracked the window thinking maybe I was getting drowsy or needed some air. Then I glanced at the passenger side mirror. For just a split second, I saw something in the mirror that made my stomach drop. It looked like a face, pressed up against the side window. Pales and eyes too wide, mouth slack, like it was open but not saying anything. But when I turned to get a better look, there was nothing there. The cab was empty and doors were locked. I told myself it was just exhaustion. Sleep deprivation will play tricks on your eyes, especially in the dark. I kept going. Somewhere around mile marker 362, I spotted a gas station lit up on the right side of the road. One of those old independent places with a flickering neon open sign. I hadn't seen a building for at least an hour, so I figured I'd stop, grab a coffee, maybe splash some water on my face. When I pulled in, I noticed a car already at one of the pumps. A late model sedan, nothing too out of the ordinary, but there was no one inside. I figured they must be inside the shop, so I parked and went in. The place smelled like burnt coffee and old pine cleaner. No music, no TV, just a humming soda fridge in the back. The guy behind the counter didn't say anything when I walked in. He just stood there, watching me. He was middle-aged, wearing a greasy apron. Looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I gave him a nod and grabbed a coffee, then went up to pay. "You coming from the south?" he asked. His voice was low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear, even though we were all alone. "Yeah," I said. "Phoenix, heading up to Salt Lake." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on mine like he was trying to figure something out. "You stopped back there? Around 3:40 or so." I blinked. "No, just saw someone by the side of the road." His mouth twitched a little. Not quite a smile, but not quite a frown. "You should keep driving," he said. "Don't stop again." Then he rang me up like nothing happened. I didn't ask questions. I paid, got back in the truck, and hit the road again. But something about that stop stuck with me. It felt off. The guy's tone, the way he asked. Like he knew something. Like that stretch of highway wasn't just empty. It was being avoided. I was back on the road less than 10 minutes when I saw headlights behind me. Looked like the sedan from the gas station. Same shape, same dull yellow glow from the high beams. I figured maybe they just left after me. But here's the weird thing. The car never passed me. I was going the speed limit, sometimes a little over, but the car just stayed back, always 100 yards behind me. I'd slow a little, so would they. Speed up, same deal. I got that crawling feeling on the back of my neck like I was being watched. About 15 miles later, I hit another curve, and when I looked again, the car was gone. Not in my mirrors, not on the shoulder. Just vanished. And I would have seen brake lights or taillights if they'd turned off. I made it to Salt Lake just after sunrise. Didn't stop again until I hit the delivery dock. When I checked the truck that morning, everything was fine, load untouched, no signs of tampering. But when I did my usual walk around, I found something odd. On the passenger side window, Right near the edge were two smudges, like someone had pressed their fingers and face against the glass. It was faint, like it had been wiped quickly, but it was there. I didn't report anything. What would I even say? That I saw a guy on the side of the road in a phantom sedan followed me for miles? That some half-asleep gas station attendant told me not to stop? Truckers trade stories all the time. Aliens, ghosts, skinwalkers, government black sites. I usually write it off, but that stretch of highway, mile marker 348, I don't take that route anymore. Don't even look at it on the map. Every time I get a dispatch that even mentions that part of Arizona, I ask for a reroute or I call in sick. Sometimes at night, I still think about that guy on the side of the road, not waving and not asking for help, just watching the sky. And I wonder if he's still there, waiting for someone to stop. Or worse, someone who already did. Running long haul is not the most glamorous life, but it suits me. I don't mind the solitude, and I've always been more comfortable behind the wheel than behind a desk. I've hauled everything, dry van, reefer, even tanker for a while. But these days I stick to cross-country freight, steady routes, decent pay, and no surprises. Well, usually no surprises. This happened back in late March, somewhere along I-40, heading east through New Mexico. It was one of those nights where the road just rolls out forever in front of you. Black sky, flat desert, barely a pair of headlights for hours. I was coming off a solid 9-hour drive, and I'd been planning to stop around midnight. There's this little truck stop just off exit 112. Not a chain, just one of those independent places with a diner, maybe 6 pumps and a gravel lot in back. I'd only stopped there once before, about a year prior, but I remember it being quiet, clean, and out of the way. I pulled in a little after 12:30 in the morning. Lot was maybe a third full, couple of reefers idling, a livestock hauler and a car hauler with all the lights off. I picked a stop near the edge of the lot, backed in clean, and shut everything down. Inside, the store was still open, though the diner was closed for the night. There was a woman working the register, older, kind-eyed. I grabbed a water, a pack of trail mix, made some small talk while I paid. I remember she looked at me kind of strangely when I said I was parking there for the night. "Be careful out there," she said, almost like an afterthought. "Lot's been weird lately." I smiled, told her I'd lock up tight, and headed back out. I've heard worse from weirder. Now I've got a routine for overnights. Always park with the nose out, always double check the doors, and always keep my key fob clipped to the bunk rail. I've also got a tire thumper under the mattress and a little button light hooked on the curtain, just enough to see by without lighting up the cab. Everything was quiet, cool air, maybe a breeze pushing some grit across the gravel. I climbed into the sleeper, pulled the curtain, and laid down. I wasn't quite tired enough to fall asleep, so I queued up a podcast. One of those true crime shows with soft voices and unsettling music. That's probably what made me notice it. A sound just outside the cab, like gravel shifting under slow, deliberate footsteps. I turned off the podcast and held my breath. Nothing, just the faint hum of a reefer unit somewhere nearby. I told myself it was probably another driver cutting across the lot, maybe walking their dog or heading to the building. It happens all the time. I clicked the light off and tried to relax. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Crunch, crunch, pause, and then a hand on the door handle. Not yanking, just testing, passenger side. Now that'll shoot adrenaline straight through you. I rolled off the bunk in one move and grabbed the thumper. Quiet as I could, I reached up and thumbed the key fob. Click, locked. The handle jiggled once, then silence. I waited about 30 seconds, maybe a little more. Then came a soft knock, 3 taps. It wasn't a normal knock. It didn't feel like someone looking for help or trying to say hello. It felt deliberate, measured, like whoever was out there already knew I was in the cab and didn't care. I stayed crouched, not moving. Tried to peek through the edge of the curtain, but couldn't see anything. Eventually, I heard the footsteps again, crunching slowly away from the truck. I stayed like that for maybe 15 minutes. Nothing more happened, no voices, no lights. Just the sound of my own pulse in my ears. I finally eased the curtain back an inch and looked out. The lot looked normal. Dim security lights, no one in sight. But I wasn't about to sleep after that. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine and pulled out of that spot so fast I nearly took out my own mirror. As I turned toward the exit, I saw him, a man, standing near the edge of the lot between the last truck and the weeds. No jacket, just a dark hoodie and jeans, hands in his pockets, staring dead at me as I rolled past. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I merged back onto I-40 and drove another hour straight before I found a Love's with cameras, lights, and a dozen trucks already parked. The weirdest part? The next day when I was fueling up outside Amarillo, I got to talking with another woman driver who'd pulled in next to me. We swapped the usual stories, routes, freight, places to avoid, and I mentioned the truck stop off exit 112. She went real quiet. "You stopped there last night?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "but I didn't stay long. I had some creep poking around my cab." Her eyes narrowed. "Same thing happened to me last month. Thought I imagined it. Knocked once, real soft. And when I looked out, there was this guy, just standing there in the dark. No vehicle, no bag, nothing." We didn't say much after that, just nodded and went back to our trucks. I haven't stopped at that place since, and now every time I park for the night, I look at the gravel, just in case someone's standing there, watching and waiting. I run mostly east of the Mississippi, fewer long dead zones, more halfway decent stops, and I can still make it home a couple weekends a month. This happened back in March, so just a few months ago, and I still check my mirrors a little longer than I used to. I had a load of palletized flooring coming out of Roanoke, headed to Norfolk. It was the next morning drop, so I figured I'd knock out most of the drive the night before and catch some sleep near Chesapeake. By the time I got past Emporia, it was close to 10:30. I checked the apps, Love's, Pilot's, TA, all showing red, every lot full or close to it. That's when I remembered this wide gravel pull-off off Route 58. Not official, not striped, but it's one of those spots drivers share by word of mouth. Enough room for 4 or 5 trucks, a little hidden and usually quiet. I'd parked there last summer during a thunderstorm and didn't have any problems. Figured it was better than driving tired or dodging four-wheelers at midnight. When I pulled in, there were 2 other rigs already there, both dark and engines off. I backed in a few spaces down, let the idle hum while I finished logging out and locked everything down. Did my usual checks, seals, tires, doors, fuel cap, all good. Climbed into the bunk, pulled the curtain, and let a podcast roll. One of those chill, true crime types. I wasn't even 10 minutes in when I noticed headlights flash across the curtain. I peeked out through the gap. A silver Corolla had pulled in, slow and deliberate. Not uncommon, but this one didn't park in a space or turn around. It stopped directly behind my trailer, sat there idling, lights on for about a minute. Then the engine cut out, but no one exited the vehicle. I watched for a while, and sometimes you get locals looking for a quiet place to smoke up or make a call. But something about this felt off. It was too still. Then the driver's side door opened, and a guy stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe, stocky build, jeans and a hoodie. He looked like any guy you'd see at a gas station, but there was something too casual about how he walked. Not looking around, just making his way toward the passenger side of my trailer, fingers grazing the side like he was checking it out. I cracked the driver's door and looked out. I didn't see him. Then came a single soft knock from the passenger side. Not loud, but just enough to let me know he was there. Then another knock. I slipped into the front seat, hand on the door handle, thumper stick within reach. Tapped the brake pedal once. Brake lights lit up. That seemed to get his attention. He stepped into view from behind the trailer, standing just in the red glow of the rear lights, staring at my cab. I opened the door a few inches and called out, "You good?" "Flat tire," he said, like it was a question and a statement rolled into one. "Looked like you were low on your back right. Thought I'd check." Now, I'd just done my walk around. There was no way that tire was low. He was fishing. "I'll handle it in the morning," I said, keeping it firm. "Appreciate it." He nodded but didn't back off. Walked a few feet closer, close enough that I put the flashlight dead on his chest. He winced and held up a hand. "Easy," he said, smiling now. "I got a jack in the car. Just thought I'd help out. Hate to see someone stuck out here." There was something about that smile, like he wasn't offering help. He was offering a test. I kept the light on him. "No thanks," I said. "I've got it covered." That hung in the air a moment too long. Then he said quieter, "You don't want to end up needing the wrong kind of help out here." That was the moment the tone changed. Not a threat, not directly, but a suggestion, a warning wrapped in fake concern. He held my gaze for a few seconds more, then turned and walked off without another word. But before he rounded the corner of the trailer, he reached up and palmed something onto the side mirror, smooth, like he'd done it before. He climbed into his car and backed up slowly. He didn't leave, just yet. He parked at the far end of the lot, facing me, lights off and engine idling again. I got out, walked the length of the trailer with the flashlight. Tires looked perfect, fuel cap untouched, no marks or scratches. But when I got back around to the passenger side mirror, I saw what he left. It was a small square sticker, white, maybe 3 inches across. Plain font, said, "Emergency Driver Assist," with a phone number on it. No company name, no logo, just the number in those 4 words. Now, if you've been driving for a while, you know real stickers like that usually have DOT info or company branding. This wasn't one of those. This was something printed on a home labeler or made online. It looked clean but homemade. Some folks in the community have seen them before. They're bait. You call that number and maybe you get a real person, or maybe you give some confirmation. Female driver, traveling alone, likely parked for the night. You're a soft target. I peeled it off with a glove and stuck it in my door pocket. Backed the truck around, this time parking nose out, and left the engine running. He stayed in his car for another 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then pulled out like nothing happened. No hurry, no drama, just gone. I didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, after I dropped the load, I called the number out of curiosity. No ring, just a click, then dead silence. Not even a disconnect tone. Nothing. Area code was Jersey, but no listing for any company. I tried plugging it into a burner phone forum. No hits. I threw the sticker away after that. You do this job long enough and you hear stories. Fake DOT guys, knock and grab thefts, truck stop creepers. But that was the first time I felt like someone was testing me directly, seeing what kind of driver I was, seeing if I'd open the door, step out, let them get close. And if I had, well, maybe I wouldn't be telling this story. Most people think driving a logging truck's just like any other rig job, just with more dirt roads. They don't know the half of it. You spend enough time in those woods, hauling 30 tons of fir and pine down logging roads that barely qualify as roads, you start to notice things most folks never will. Not ghosts, not monsters, nothing that obvious. Just things that don't add up. Things that stick with you in a quiet, needling way. I've been driving for nearly 15 years, mostly in Washington and Oregon. Never had much incident aside from a few mechanical failures, and one pretty bad winter spill near Morton that cost me a week of work and a busted shoulder. But what I'm about to tell you happened about 4 years ago in the fall, on a job near the Olympic Peninsula. It's the only time I've ever felt something close to fear out there. Not the kind that gets your heart pumping. The kind that creeps in slow and just sits with you like fog. The job started off normal. We were pulling loads from a site up Burnside Ridge, a remote spur of Highway 101 that used to be used for timber back in the 70s, but most companies stopped logging there because of the grade. Too steep and too narrow. Still, the outfit I contract for had a buyer lined up who wanted old-growth Douglas fir, and they found a small patch up there untouched. Said it was isolated, hard to reach but worth the effort. They weren't wrong. The trees were monsters, massive old boys with thick bark and perfect grain. The kind that shouldn't still be standing on private land. I remember walking around one of them during a rest break and thinking, "You've been here longer than anything else I know." There was something solemn about it, not magical, just heavy with time. The first few days of the haul went smoothly. The road was a real bastard, washed out in parts, steep as hell, full of tight switchbacks and drop-offs, but I've dealt with worse. We took it slow, only one truck up or down at a time, no radios, which sucked, but the terrain interfered too much, so we just used a check-in guy at the base with a clipboard and a flag system. Anyways, the day it happened started like any other. I showed up at the bottom of the ridge around 6:30 in the morning, cold as hell and fog rolling in off the coast. The check-in guy, Pete, gave me the go-ahead to start climbing once the last truck was clear. I remember him saying something like, "You'll probably be the last run today. Weather's coming in." Typical coastal storm brewing. I made it up to the site around 8, loaded up like normal, chatted a bit with the site foreman, a guy named Lewis. He was fussing about getting everyone down before rain hit. I got my load chained and tarped, grabbed some coffee from the thermos, and headed back down around 8:45. That descent, I don't know how to explain it. It felt off from the beginning. Not dangerous, not yet. Just strange, like I was being watched, or like something about the morning was a half click out of sync. I've always had a decent sense for when something's about to go sideways. Call it a gut instinct, maybe even a sixth sense. And that morning, my gut was knotted up tight before I'd even put the truck in gear. You have to understand, I've done mountain grades in snow, ice, even wildfire smoke. But this was different. It wasn't fear. It was more like my nerves were on high alert, and I didn't know why. I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong, but not in a way I could point to. About 10 minutes into the descent, I hit a stretch I hated. A narrow turn with a sharp drop on the passenger side. No guardrail, just a ribbon of gravel hugging the slope. I had made the turn a dozen times already that week, but this time, halfway through it, I saw something move up ahead. Not on the road, but just above it, off to the left, maybe 15 yards into the trees. It wasn't big, human-sized, maybe. And it wasn't walking, it was still, just watching. I told myself it was a deer or an elk, but I've seen enough wildlife to know the way things move, the way their bodies are shaped. This was upright, shoulders hunched forward, like it had been squatting behind a tree and had just leaned out to watch me pass. I didn't stop, couldn't even if I had wanted to, not on that incline, but I slowed, trying to get a better look. The trees were too dense and the fog was too thick. I couldn't see it anymore. I kept going and told myself it was nothing, maybe a poacher or a surveyor, maybe even one of the loggers hiking down for some reason. But a mile later I caught it again, this time in the mirror. At first I thought it was a shadow from the load swaying behind me, but the shape, whatever it was following me. Not right behind me, but back on the slope, keeping pace, barely visible through the trunks and fog. Too fast for a person, but not running. It was more like it was gliding down slope. I kept looking back, trying to make out details, but every time I focused on it, it seemed to shift, almost like it was melting into the surroundings, like I was only catching it out of the corner of my eye. I started to feel that tingling in my hands, same kind you get when you grab an electric fence, a low buzz just under the skin. And that feeling I'd had from the start, It got worse, like static in my spine, like something knew I'd seen it. I kept telling myself, just get to the bottom, don't stop, don't look back again. And I didn't. Not until I reached the check-in point, maybe 45 minutes later. When I pulled up, Pete wasn't in his usual spot. The shack was empty and his little yellow flag leaning against the wall. I got out, stretched my legs, and called for him. There was no answer. I thought maybe he'd gone to take a leak, so I waited a minute, then 5. Still no sign. Eventually, I walked around the shack, figuring maybe he went to check the drainage ditch or something. And that's when I noticed the marks in the gravel. Boot prints, most likely Pete's. But next to them, almost parallel, were other tracks. Not paw prints, not shoes either. Just indentations, long and narrow, like someone dragged a canoe upright through the gravel. But there were no tread marks, no lines, just smooth, symmetrical dips. I knelt down to touch one and felt how cold the ground was there. It was colder than the air. That's when I decided to leave. I hopped back in the cab, locked the doors out of instinct, and sat there for a minute trying to decide whether to call someone or not. But who do you call? The sheriff? Dispatch? Before I could decide, Pete came walking out of the woods. Not from the trail, just straight out from the trees about 20 feet past the shack. No urgency and no expression. Just walked up like nothing was weird. I rolled down the window and asked if everything was all right. He looked at me a second too long before saying, "Yeah, just needed a minute." Didn't explain where he'd been, didn't ask me anything, just scribbled something on his clipboard and waved me on. I left and didn't say anything else. Drove the load all the way to the mill, dumped it, signed out, and went home early. I called off the next day and said I was sick. I saw Pete a couple weeks later. He was back at the lot and he looked the same. He was friendly enough, but when I brought up that morning, joking, like, "Hey man, you spooked me disappearing like that," he just frowned. "I don't remember that," he said. I thought he was messing with me, but he looked serious. He said he didn't remember going into the woods. Said he remembered me coming down the ridge and that was it. Nothing in between. I dropped it after that, and I haven't brought it up since. The road got shut down a few months later. Landslide wiped out part of the switchback, and it never got repaired. Probably never will. Sometimes I dream about it, though. Not the thing in the woods, not Pete. Just the feeling, that crawling sense in my gut. Like I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, like I'd been noticed. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd stopped. Or worse, if I'd gotten out to look.